Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the second day of this third World Meeting of International Law Societies. Yesterday, we had the privilege of hearing from some of the most brilliant legal minds from around the world as we explored the latest trends and developments in the field of law. Today promises to be another exciting day as we delve deeper into some of the key issues that are shaping the future of international law. As we begin our proceedings, I would like to thank our esteemed keynote speakers, moderators, and panelists for sharing their expertise and experience with us. Over the course of the day, we will be discussing a range of topics from the challenges of climate change and environmental protection to migration and democracy. We will have the opportunity to engage in lively debates and exchange ideas with one another as we work together towards a better understanding of the role that the law plays in shaping our world. Once again, I would like to welcome you all. Today's first plenary roundtable is organized by the Portuguese Society of International Law and the International Law Association of the Singapore branch. It will focus on the role of international law in the fight against climate change and the promotion of sustainable development. We kindly invite the following panelists. Ms. Patricia Galvão Tales, Vice President of the Portuguese Society of International Law. Ms. Nilufer Oral, Director of the Center for International Law of the National University of Singapore. Professor Juan José Ruda Santolaria, member of the United Nations International Law Commission and professor at the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú. Professor Fernando Loureiro Bastos from the Faculty of Law of the University of Lisbon. Professor Jean-Marc Touvenan, Professor of International Law at the University of Paris, Nanterre, and Secretary General of the Hague Academy of International Law, and José Luis Pérez Sánchez Cerro, Secretary General of the Permanent Commission of the South Pacific. Without further delay, we give the floor to the chair, Patricia Galvão.
Muchas gracias y buenos días a todos. Bienvenidos al segundo día de este Encuentro de las Sociedades Nacionales de Derecho Internacional o por el Derecho Internacional. Me gustaría agradecer en primer lugar a la Sociedad Peruana de Derecho Internacional por nos haber invitado a esta ciudad maravillosa con gente maravillosa para disfrutar un poco de la ciudad, pero poco, pero trabajar. ¿Puedo utilizar eso? Sí, mejor. Pero sobre todo para intercambiar ideas entre los representantes de las sociedades. Es con mucho gusto que en representación de la Sociedad Portuguesa de Derecho Internacional estoy acá con vosotros. Me gustaría también agradecer en particular a la organización, al embajador Oscar Matúa, todo el equipo y sobre todo no puedo dejar de mencionar Gonzalo Telo, que de hecho está siempre ahí un poco en la sombra, pero es la persona quien siempre esté en contacto, procurando siempre contactar los moderadores, que los moderadores hagan su trabajo con sus panas, pero sobre todo dirigiendo esa equipa de jóvenes muy amables, muy competentes. Y muchas gracias por todo. Sí. Now let me just switch to English. I think we don't have a fully polyglot panel, but we'll have maybe French, English, and Spanish, not Portuguese, which is not one of the languages of the meetings. But I'm very happy that upon the invitation of the Peruvian Society to the Portuguese Society to put together a panel on these important challenges of climate change and sustainable development, and how international law can contribute in setting the framework for combating and promoting these important challenges. I've also extended on behalf of the Portuguese Society an invitation to the ILA branch of Singapore, and we have here Professor Nilufer Aral, who's online, and she will also say some words on behalf of the Singapore ILA branch, because we thought it was also a good example, and this was done also in other panels, to have a joint effort between different societies in trying to bring together the expertise to discuss this important matter. So I have my task very much facilitated by the previous speaker who introduced all the panelists, so I'm not going to lose time with that, but just to say that we try to focus, of course, climate change and sustainable developments are quite wide topics, but we try to put together a list of issues that we hope then we can continue the discussion, and I really asked my panelists to be very strict on the 10-minute time, and we'll hope that we can leave as much time for discussion. But we'll be covering topics from oceans and climate change to the issues of sea level rise and the possible disappearance of the state, to the possibility of a new legally binding instrument on marine plastic pollution, also to the questions that now are being brought before international courts and tribunals in terms of litigation and what can be expected from that, and then finally latest developments relating on the law of the sea. So it's a broad scope of topics, but they do have this common thread of trying to look at what international law can do with regard to climate change and for the promotion of sustainable development. So without further ado, I will start by asking Dr. Nilufer Aral, who is 13 hours later, so quite late in the night, and thank you so much, Nilufer, for being with us, and I see Fernando is also online. So let me start with you, Nilufer, and also thanking very much your presence and the support of the ILA branch of Singapore, also to the organization of this panel. To you, Nilufer.
Muchas gracias, dear Patricia. Buenos días a todos. And I'm afraid that's the limitation of my Spanish. Greetings from Singapore, and I'm delighted to be participating on behalf of ILA Singapore. I wish I were actually in wonderful Lima, enjoying the beautiful city and the camaraderie, but hopefully some other time. Today, I will be talking about the climate change in the ocean in a broad sense. And I think I will spend, first of all, I would say posing the problematique, and then highlighting what are some of the avenues for international law. Now, I do have a, well, maybe can I do a PowerPoint? Is that allowed, Patricia? I don't know. If not, I'll just...
I think so. If you try to share your screen, I think that should work.
Yeah, it says that the host has disabled the screen sharing. Well, if not, that's fine. Then I will just have to do it without my PowerPoint.
I think we can settle that. No? Enable your permission for sharing the screen. Yeah, we'll do that. Just 10 seconds.
Okay, all right. Oh, very good, excellent. All right, let's see. Let me do the share screen. All right, very good, thank you so much. Can you see it? Good, yes? All right, and I will be very good on the time, so I will see, very good. So I'll talk about ocean and climate change, and I think the first point, of course, is to highlight I think the ocean is often overlooked, and when we're looking at climate change and the problem of climate change, and yet the ocean is 70% of the Earth's surface, and it is absolutely critical and integral to the climate system. And when we're looking at climate change, the ocean is what they call a sinking reservoir, because it has been absorbing about 20-30% of the atmospheric carbon dioxide, meaning that there would be much more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere but for the ocean. And it has also absorbed some 90% of the heat as well. So we would have a much hotter atmosphere but for the ocean. Having said that, however, the ocean in its role as a sink in a reservoir is satiated because of anthropogenic, human-caused greenhouse gases, and for the ocean it really is carbon dioxide. And the result is we have ocean warming, sea level rise, deoxygenation, and ocean acidification. And all of these, one could spend a long time discussing these, but I'm really just going to go quickly. You're all familiar, of course, with the IPCC, and since the beginning, the ocean has been evaluated by the IPCC. And in 2019, they did the first special report on the ocean and cryosphere. And of course, we have the recent 6th assessment report. However, as I will show to you, when we look at the climate change regime itself, the ocean is really very narrowly represented. It really is not addressed sufficiently. When we look at the IPCC reports, and it is important to really understand the science, the ocean is projected to transition to unprecedented conditions with increased temperatures, acidification, virtually certain, and oxygen decline. And of course, the magnitude of these changes will depend on what type of emission scenario we're under. But right now, unfortunately, we're on the high path. Sea level rise, I mean, it's just amazing that since 1900, the level of rising sea levels, according to the science, and these are scientific reports, is more than it has been in the last 3,000 years. Ocean acidification, which is a problem that really came up, just maybe over just 10, 15 years ago, but it is the problem that the ocean has been absorbing carbon dioxide, and that is why it's a sinking reservoir. And to me, it's just really amazing. For millions of years, we had a stable pH balance in the ocean, but because of anthropogenic carbon dioxide that the ocean has been absorbing, it has decreased by 30%. And this has a very deleterious adverse impact on marine life, and which can also alter the marine food chain. So here what I've just tried to do is give a flow chart of the various impacts of climate change on the marine environment, which impacts fish. The fish are migrating. They're going north to colder waters. I think, Patricia, in Portugal, the sardines are moving north, the mackerel in the northern, in the UK. But also from the international law perspective, in addition to the marine environment, it also has impact sea level rise on maritime boundaries, the status of islands, and of course the topic that both Juan Jose and Patricia are studying, human displacement and loss of statehood. So just on looking at where we are in international law, unfortunately there's a dilemma. And the dilemma is that the two major regimes to address the oceans are the Law of the Sea Convention and the UNFCCC, the Climate Change Framework. The Law of the Sea Convention, the Constitution for the Ocean, as comprehensive as it seems to be, is a pre-climate change convention, the regime. Therefore, it was negotiated and adopted before issues such as ocean warming and sea level rise were really on the agenda. The UNFCCC, while it is the principal climate change regime, it specifically addresses climate change. However, the ocean has a very minimal and functional role, which I will show. So when we look at the climate change regime, when we look at the definition of climate system, it does include the ocean under the hydrosphere. However, when we look at the objective of the Framework Convention on Climate Change, it is very atmospheric. The ultimate objective is the stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere. The only place that we see reference to the ocean is in Article 4, and here, again, it's a functional role given to the ocean, where the parties are to promote sustainable management and promote and cooperate in the conservation and enhancement of sinks and reservoirs, basically. We move forward to the Paris Agreement. Once again, by 2015, there is so much scientific evidence about the impact of climate change on the oceans, including ocean acidification, yet again, very minimal addressing of the ocean. There's a reference in the preamble. The objective now has been for the first time quantified to a temperature target, and now we know, of course, it's really the 1.5 degrees centigrade to maintain the increase to 1.5 centigrade above pre-industrial levels. Question is, what relationship does that have to the ocean? And particularly when we're looking at ocean acidification. But that's about it. It makes reference to Article 4. All right, so then we move next to the Law of the Sea Convention. And of course, even though the Law of the Sea Convention is a pre-climate change regime, on the other hand, the obligations are such that one could definitely, in my view, interpret them to incorporate climate change, ocean warming, acidification, sea level rise. And one of the issues is whether carbon dioxide could be, would fall into the definition of pollution. And I think there's a very strong argument that it does. It's the introduction by man or human, directly or indirectly, of substances or energy into the marine environment, which results or is likely to result in such deleterious effects as to harm living resources. We see also the obligations to, under Article 192, to protect and preserve the marine environment. It's a due diligence obligation, very broad, and why should it not also include protecting and preserving against the deleterious impacts of climate change? And again, Article 94, I won't go through all of these, but we see that these obligations are important because they also address all sources of pollution, atmospheric, land-based, and vessel sources. And we look at the specific provisions on the convention concerning land-based and vessel source and atmospheric pollution, which are all relevant for climate change. They are all sources of greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide for the ocean. It's clear, states shall. There is a very undiluted obligation for states to adopt laws and regulations. And so I'm looking, how am I doing time-wise? So another issue we have, of course, is sea level rise. And very quickly, what the impacts of sea level rise, again, because the Law of the Sea Convention was a pre-climate change, it really doesn't address this. And the UNFCCC, absolutely nothing on sea level rise, and especially when we're talking about maritime zones. So we know the issue is the question of sea level rise and the impact on baselines. And these baselines that could disappear because of sea level rise, and the issue of whether, one, are they ambulatory? But put that aside, is there an obligation under international law and the Law of the Sea Convention to actually update, resurvey, and redraw these baselines, which, if that is done, that means that the maritime zones that are measured from the baselines would shift landward, and with them, of course, the legal regime as well. And this raises many questions. Most importantly is one of legal stability, certainty, and predictability. What about archipelagic baselines? And we know that archipelagic baselines, which something created under the Law of the Sea Convention, it is when the archipelagic state can draw straight archipelagic baselines joining the outermost points of the outermost islands and drying reefs, which can be extremely susceptible to sea level rise. And why is this relevant? Because there's a very complicated formula, and I'm not going to go into the detail, but this complicated formula could be undone. And then what happens to those archipelagic waters that were contained? Another issue for international law, what happens to islands? Can an island that is entitled right now lawfully to all the maritime zones devolve into a rock when it can no longer sustain human habitation or economic life of its own, in which case no exclusive economic zone or continental shelf? And that happens because of sea level rise, loss of territory, but also the loss of the capacity to have, for example, potable water because of saltwater intrusion and other impacts of sea level rise that makes habitation difficult. And this is just, so, what happens to offshore features? This is from Clive Schofield. So anyway, now international law, and very quickly I'm coming to an end. Of course, the International Law Commission, and two of my co-chairs are here. We are addressing these issues. The Law of the Sea issue, we had our first issues paper that was co-authored by myself and Bogdan Oresco, and it was presented to the study group in the International Law Commission that looked at the issues concerning maritime boundaries, islands, but not the marine environment. That we're not looking at. Other ways that now that's being addressed, and I think that may be discussed later on, of course, is seeking of an advisory opinion. One is the Commission on Small Island States has made a request to the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. And there's also, on the 29th of March, it's going to be presented to the General Assembly, the Vanuatu advisory opinion, that is also include ocean matters as well. So we'll see. There's much to be done because there's still a lot of gaps, and I think it's very important for international law to be proactively engaged in resolving these gaps and addressing these absolutely existential issues in some cases. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Nilufer, for providing us with this overview in such a compact period of time, but you've touched on all the essential issues and how, especially, I think, in the last part of the presentation, all these developments that are currently going on, and all of those are reflections of the attempts of international law trying to address these issues, including through advisory opinions. And